All right, good afternoon, everybody. You can all hear me, right? I don't need to use the microphone. Yes? All right, welcome to the configuration management session. I'm Fabian Bircher, or Bircher on Drupal.org. I work for Nuvole. Nuvole is a 100% Drupal company. I will give you a brief introduction so that you know where all of this comes from. We have a distributed team in Italy, Belgium, and the Czech Republic. And our clients are basically from all over the world, but mostly Europe and the United States. And our projects are mostly for institutional organizations or international organizations, institutions. And for them, it's important that they have a fast delivery. So often we have several developers working simultaneously on a site. And they require frequent changes. So we need to have a safe update for the site. The challenges are the remote collaboration on the site development and keeping track of the configuration changes during the development. And then, of course, pushing these updates to the production sites. I guess most of you face exactly the same or very similar challenges, and you have been working with Drupal 7 and you're familiar with how this works there. So first, a little bit about the code-driven development and what I mean when I say that. And so historically, Drupal has kept everything in the database. When you click, all the changes that you make when you click, they go to the database. And when you want to deploy that, you don't want to deploy the database. So you want to separate this. And in Drupal 6, the features appeared, and it was possible to export some configuration into PHP code, which then was like revisionable, and you could have between different environments. In Drupal 7, we still have features, and it matured, but it relies on third parties to integrate with features, and it's not complete. In Drupal 8, however, configuration and content are separated. It's very clearly distinguished, and the configuration is basically text-based. So I guess most of you have been in the session of chicks this morning, so I will go over these topics rather fast, but you can always stop me and ask for more clarification. So obviously the database-driven workflow has its disadvantages, and I just list them here because they're like the pain points that led to the configuration management initiative, basically. You click, you save, the stuff goes to the database, and Drupal forgets about these changes. And then you have both of them mixed together, and you lose track of the individual changes. And it's still possible in Drupal 8 to do the same thing, and I guess some people will just do it that way as well. But for those of you who don't, there is a new and better way. Then in Drupal 7, to get around this, we use features, and I guess a lot of you also. And so the features is made for packaging configuration. But in order to package configuration, you need to export it to code somehow, to text files that you can version together with your PHP code. And features is good at packaging, but it's like an add-on. It's like bolted on top of the Drupal system to support this. And not everything is exportable or traceable in that sense. So when you think about it, when you make a feature, you whitelist the configuration from your site that you want to be able to track, that you have under your control. But the code-driven development is not just features. It's like a technical choice. It's an idea, and it also includes like make files and profiles and so on. The whole way of how you make this a project so that you have the control over the configuration. And the keywords, of course, are traceability and repeatability and reuse, so that you can also go back to a previous state, and you can, like, basically what you do with the code already, which you cannot do with the database. So there's the configuration management system in Drupal 8, also known as the CMI. And because a lot of people are used to features and the way how this worked, I think it's important to realize what the reference use case is for CMI. And it's keeping the site online and developing and testing the new configuration on a copy of the site, of the same site. And then exporting the configuration from your testing or development site and importing them on the production or on the staging site. So you have the same site in different environments, and you transfer the configuration between the environments. This becomes later important because you maybe work on more than one site. So this is a brief, do you see the mouse as well? Oh, okay, sorry. A brief example on how this works, just with the UI for everyone not developer-centered as such. So you clone the whole site in the same way you would clone a Drupal 7 site, so the database, the Drupal tree, and all the files. And you restore the backup, then you have another environment or another server with exactly the same site. And then you do some development, for example, changing the site name. I use this term on purpose. You export the configuration of the site. You go to your production site, you import. So here you download essentially a zip file or a tar. Then here you upload this file, the zip. You can review the changes that are introduced by this new configuration. So here you see the site name changed. Then you apply it, and your production is now synchronized with the configuration. In Drupal 7, you would create a feature exporting the site name variable. Then you would update the feature, transfer the feature to production, and there enable or revert the feature. So let's have a closer look at the configuration management. There's a core module called config, and it provides this import-export functionality. And this is this in-between environment changing of configuration. But it's important to notice that it's the same site that this is geared for. Then there's different, not types of configuration, but different places where the configuration is. So you have the original configuration or the default configuration that can be provided by profiles and modules and themes and so on. If you open Drupal core and you go to the standard profile, for example, you will see a lot of them there. The configuration is stored in a file, in a text file, in a YAML file, and one file per configuration object. Then when this default configuration is imported, it happens when you install the module, then it becomes active and it becomes stored in the database. So it doesn't consider the files in the default configuration anymore. This is a sample of such a YAML file. And as talked about before, there's the active store and the staging store. So the active store is where your configuration lives. The site, when it runs, it uses this place to know what configuration is valid on the site or is inactive. And there's also the staging store, and this is where you upload the content of your zip file to, when in the previous example that I was just showing you, when you upload a zip file. And that's why also by default this file is in a temporary directory. They both have the same structure, so you can also diff them, even though one is in the files and one is in the database by default. The default configuration is in the config/install subdirectory. And after it is installed, the site owns this configuration. So when you as a module developer or as a theme or as a profile developer, you make this install or this default configuration. Once it's installed, once it goes to the active storage, you don't own this configuration anymore. The site may change it and whatever, and you cannot know, or you cannot should be sure that it will still be the one used. So when you update it, it doesn't reflect on the site. Configuration can also have dependencies on other configuration, for example, or on modules and so on. And in between the staging and active directory, you do the synchronization. And once the stage configuration becomes active, then this is the synchronization. And in this step, new modules are enabled, new fields, content types are added and removed. And so this happens in this synchronization step. When you look at the new configuration, and you see what changes. For example, a new module is enabled, or another one is disabled, or a field has been added, and so on. And then after the synchronization step, this becomes, it runs through this process of enabling the modules and making the configuration happen. And it's important to always import the configuration, because this process needs to run. And when you install Drupal 8, you still have the active directory also in the files, which is empty by default because the active configuration is in the database. But you could edit also the database directly and edit the configuration that is in the database. But that's not good because it needs to run through this. And in addition to this default configuration that the module needs to install, or that the module depends on being installed, there's also the optional configuration. And there you can ship configuration that only gets enabled when the relevant dependencies are met. So for example, you can, in core, the example is the node module that ships with views. The node module as such doesn't depend on views directly, but some of the configuration that it provides, namely the views, depend on views, obviously. So this is a way to resolve circular dependencies and between different modules that provide different configuration of each other and so on. And when modules are enabled, then it also checks if there is the optional configuration in other modules that are now having their dependencies met, and imports those as well. So it's based on the schema. For example, here you have the views, and it says this configuration type is provided by views, and then this is how Drupal figures out which types of configuration can be then imported when the schema becomes active. The default location for the staging area is, as I said before, the files directory, and it's in a mangled path so that you cannot guess it. And it's so that site builders, and they just install Drupal, they can upload this configuration and do this thing that I showed before in this process by uploading a zip file. But if you are more of a developer and you want to have this configuration in Git, then you don't want to upload the configuration and you don't want to download the zip file, but instead you want to do it with Drush. And for that, it's good to have the staging directory under version control and outside of the files directory, because the server doesn't need to write to it, because you do it with Drush, and you need to properly protect it. So if you version also the directory above the root directory of Drupal, then you can also put it there. So Drush. Everybody knows Drush, I assume. For Drupal 8, you need Drush 8, because Drupal 8 is not stable yet, and Drush 7 is. You need Composer for it, which is also handy for Drupal 8 itself. Maybe the most important change is Drush CR instead of Drush CC all. Cache rebuild instead of cache clear. And most of the other things just work as they did before. And it's really easy to get used to. So of course, you can also export the configuration with Drush. You would just write Drush config export or CAX. And it asks you where to do that. You can also specify more directories than the staging one, and then you can here tell which directory it should export the configuration to. So you can have several sets of configuration at the same time. Then of course the Drush import is the same. You can select which directory you want to import from, but that's maybe more advanced. You can also preview the changes that would happen with Drush, and then you get like this nice output. So I'd like to compare Drupal 7 with Drupal 8, because in the session I announced that some stuff changed in between. And Drupal 8 also has features coming along. And so you can do with Drupal 8 the same that you did with Drupal 7 as well. Like you can have the same workflow and you can do the same things. But that's like having a car with only one gear and then getting a new car with 2 gears and not knowing how to shift gears. And the CMI is designed for this specific use case of moving configuration between environments. And that's what most people do with features now. And features will still have a good use case in Drupal 8, but that's not it. So I compare the different ways of how Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 deal with configuration. So in Drupal 7 we have features, and it's this multi-purpose tool that some people are not very happy with. In Drupal 8 there are several tools and modules, and in general they're more focused on a single task on what they want to do. So features in Drupal 8 doesn't want to do everything. It wants to do its specific use case. So in Drupal 7 you have a collection of logically related Drupal elements, and they're packaged into PHP code using hooks. And this exportability is a precondition to packaging. In Drupal 8, the configuration management references the whole site configuration. So it's not like you select a few configurations that you want, it's everything. So all the modules that you have enabled, all the views, everything is there. And that's to make sure that it's sane between the different environments, and you have this consistency. So for example, when you have a development module enabled and you export the configuration, that will be part of the configuration, obviously. So you need to remember that. In Drupal 7, it's PHP, and it's imperative, and it's interpreted. So it means it's a statement of what should be changed. It's a hook implementation. And if this file somehow is malformatted in some way, then your site breaks because your PHP files are broken. And it's located in folders for modules, and it's treated as modules. However, in Drupal 8, it's in YAML, which is declarative. So it says how the system should be rather than how the system should be changed. It's parsed, so if your YAML file is broken, then the parser will just complain and not import it. It's located in specific folders for configuration and is in a specific place. And it's treated as data. For example, in Drupal 7, you have rules, and the rules configuration is in JSON. So it's not code as such, it describes how the rule behaves. It's similar to that concept. Support for it in Drupal 7, if you develop a module, it doesn't necessarily need to work together with features. There's no guarantees that things will behave well with features. Some modules do, some others are notoriously known for not behaving well together with features. And in Drupal 8, it comes with core. It's the way to do things. It's if you were here for Check the Session, the configuration entities are the way how you deal with configuration in Drupal 8. And like the support comes with it out of the box. Unless you do your own crazy PHP things, the configuration will be just magically be able to be deployed. So, configuration and modules. Features are special modules, but they're essentially modules. And when their hooks are invoked, that's what happens. The feature changes, it owns its configuration. The module implementation, or the hook implementation in the feature module is run. This is the code of the module says how the feature is done. And so the feature as such tracks this configuration. It knows what the configuration is, and it tells you, for example, if you have a view, if it changes, but the view, you can always revert the feature and have this view that you have in code. In Drupal 8, the modules provide the initial value for the configuration. So it's like soft configuration in a way. It's like what you would have otherwise in a hook install. Like you provide the configuration and then you let it go. You let the site own the configuration so that the site can decide how it should be, and so it can be moved. So if it changes a bit, then that's up to the site and not up to the module. No, I cannot take a phone. So if you want, in this sense, every module in Drupal 8 is a feature because it can have configuration that comes with it. But then afterwards it's decoupled. The features in Drupal 7 explicitly lists in its infos file all the configuration that it ships with, and all the rest is not concern of the specific feature. The configuration management, on the other hand, tracks everything. I already said that a couple of times, but I think it's really important. And it's saved per config item. So this concept of like what a configuration is very defined. And you can import them or export them individually or everything at once. And if you do everything at once, then if a file is missing, then that means this configuration has been deleted. So if you export your configuration in your zip file, and you open a zip file and you remove a couple of files, and then you upload the changed zip file to the others environment. Then it will see that these files are missing and say, oh, you wanted to remove them, and they will remove them. So that's the difference between doing everything and doing individual ones. Because if you do individual ones, it doesn't know if you removed another one, obviously. But if you do all together, it will check for also deleted configuration. Then this staging of the configuration. In Drupal 7, you have the feature states that are normal, overwritten, or needs review. You have the feature revert and feature update to resolve this. And you also see the difference in between the different states. In Drupal 8, you have this active store and the staging store, or multiply of those. And you can import and export from the staging to the active, or the other way around. And you can also have a diff available, so it tells you what will change. So you can confirm whether this changes what you want. Of course, it works with Drush. You know Drush feature update and feature revert. And Drush 8 comes with configuration export, configuration import. They're pretty much analogous for all intents and purposes. Cross-site compatibility. So you can write a feature and deploy it on any site. And that's actually the use case of features. So you make it once, and it's ready to be deployed on several sites. Configuration management is specific to one site. And it's the same site in different environments. And configuration management is not fit for cross-site. If it's a different site, it has a different set of configuration. And you cannot, you can individually export a configuration and import it on another site, but you cannot do this with the whole configuration, because the site knows its UUID, and it will only allow you to change configuration of the same site, because otherwise, it doesn't make sense. You have the code base for one site, and then you want to turn it into another site, and then Drupal gets really confused and doesn't allow you to do that. So you see already here, this is where features comes in Drupal 8, basically. The boundaries of configuration. In Drupal 7, you have some configuration that can be exported through the Entity API, the CTools plugins, or variables with strong arm. There's very different ways of how configuration can be exported and what constitutes its configuration. You can even export content with the features UUID. And menu links and some of the custom things, they can be problematic. In Drupal 8, it's very clearly separated what counts as configuration and what counts as not configuration. And the boundary of one configuration object is also very clearly defined. And you have this configuration and content and state, basically. So you have the content, which is like the nodes and the taxonomy terms and users. And you also have state, which is like the last time the cron has been run, like a typical example, and this kind of stuff. And the configuration is what you intend to be able to be deployed, basically, like as a rule of thumb. And features for Drupal 8 already exists. It solves this packaging problem. It's still under development, and I will not be able to show you because with the latest version of Drupal 8 it's broken at the moment. But it was in a demo state for the last DrupalCon, so you can check out the video from there and see it in action. Or hopefully it will get fixed soon, and then it will also be available again. The interface is pretty much the same as in Drupal 7. However, it works very differently. And the usage pattern has also changed. So it's not meant to be a production module. It's meant to be a development module. And I will get to this later as well again, because some of the limitations of the configuration management can be solved with features, and you will see. In Chix's talk, it was really nice because he said, with this API, you limit yourself to better define the scope of what you do with it, and to understand how it works. And so CMI has its limitations, and one of those can be lived with, let's say, with the addition of features. So let's look a little bit more at the API. So in Drupal 7, you have basically either everything in a database or everything or the rest in a file system. And in Drupal 8, you have these different systems of storing different parts of your things. It sounds stupid when I try to abstract it that much. By default, they're also most of them in a database, but they're easily taken out of the database or put in some other database. So you have this configuration entities and configuration objects. As a rule of thumb, if you have something of which you have only one, it's a configuration object. And if you have something that's like a view or something that you have more of, then it's a configuration entity, like views and all sorts of stuff that have multiple of, or you can add more. So configuration entities, they extend the config entity base class. And you see for the content entities, they extend a different base class. And both of them are entities. So there's like it can be quite complex on how all this is entities and which one are which. But for that, I think there's also the recording from this morning, and most of you have attended the session in this morning, I guess. And then this, I hope this is clear enough so I don't have to go too much into detail now. There's mutable and immutable configuration, and this is important for overrides, because configuration can also have overrides. And when you want to get the immutable configuration, which contains the overrides, you can get it in a read-only mode. And if you want to have the one that you can change, for example, if you implement a form that changes the configuration, then you need to slightly use a different pattern. Of course, here I use it directly, and you should always use dependency injection, not write it like this. So most people write stuff like this because it's shorter to do it like this, and it's easier to convey. And it also has another nice advantage because you can run it directly in Drush PHP and you see it evaluate. But if you write some serious code, then you want to use dependency injection and use all this nice system for that. So variable get and variable set is not anymore. And instead, you use this configuration system for reading and writing configuration. But it's pretty clear and understandable. I think it's not very complicated to do. Configuration can also be overwritten. For example, in the config variable in settings.php or settings.local.php. And it's useful to differentiate the development and the production environment. So I said before, when you move the configuration between environments, then you move the whole configuration. But for example, in the development environment, you want to have a different site name or something else that identifies it, or you want to use other things. you want to have the development environment, then you can change the configuration there. But you cannot override all the configuration. There's some limitations. And yeah, for example, the language also uses configuration overrides. And so, for example, the way a view is set up can be different in different languages. And then it creates an override that then applies depending on the view. A configuration object that you get through this API contains both the original value that came from the configuration that's in the active store, and also the eventual overrides. I said view label, but it's the site name, of course. So here you can see the code, how you would get the original without the overrides of the site name, and how to get the overridden one. Like the standard one is to get the overridden one, because that's what you usually want. So how do you decide whether something should be like that was a variable in Drupal 7, whether it should become state or config? And the rule of thumb is that if something was instance specific for the server or for the environment, then you state. And if it's something that should be across all the site, across all the different environments, then it should be configuration, because the configuration is the part that you deploy, and the state stays on the site. And the site together is both the file system and the content, but also the configuration and state. And so all of it together make how the site works and behaves. Working with state is very simple. You can get it and you can set it by its key, and you set it to some value and you get the value back. Pretty clear. Do you have questions so far? Yes?
So you mentioned that features can currently do some of the things that CMI can't do based on its limitation. Do you think there will ever be a point at which CMI is able to replace?
Yes, so CMI replaces features for the use case of deploying configuration. So in Drupal 7 you use features to deploy configuration. So you have a site that you work on your laptop, and then you want to have the new behavior that you taught your Drupal site to be on your production site. And currently, instead of writing everything down on a napkin and reproducing it on the live site, you export configuration to a feature and you deploy the feature. This you will not do anymore in Drupal 8 with features. The deployment process is not features anymore in Drupal 8. In Drupal 7, everybody uses features because it's the only way, but it's abusing features in a sense. That's not what features was made for, and that's why some people hate features, because that's not what it's good at. But it's the best. So, like, and this not so good part of Drupal 7 and features is redone in Drupal 8, and it's redone with configuration management, and it works. And it's because it considers only this case, it's specialized for this. It's specialized for moving the configuration between the same site, between different environments. And for that is good.
I suppose my question is more, so features will take care of the packaging.
Yes.
Do you think that might be the place that, I'm almost envisaging CMI gets better and better and features rise. Is there a world in which?
No, I think they will coexist. Because features in Drupal 8 doesn't try to do what CMI is doing, and CMI is not trying to do what features is doing. So they have different purposes. They have a different use case for it. And I think for developers that work on several sites that are similar, and for people who make distributions for Drupal 8, they will most likely also want to use features. Because you want to, features is good at taking the configuration on one side and putting it on another side. So you don't have to redo the same thing over and over again. So you make your gallery feature one and you use the gallery feature on another side. And CMI is not good for that. I mean, yes, you can export every single gallery relevant configuration, like individually export it and individually import it on the other side. But then you're not sure that you really got all the relevant configuration and all the dependencies of those configurations. And yeah, that's what features does for you. It provides you a UI to bundle, select different configurations. It even comes with new stuff that Drupal 7 features doesn't have, because it doesn't have to take care of the export anymore. It can just bundle. So now I had planned to like show you the things a little more, but it depends on what you want to see. I have set up 2 identical Drupal sites, and I can show you a little bit how you can get the configuration and how it can be overwritten and so on. But if you have other questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Talk about it. I want to go one step behind before. You mentioned CMI manages the same site, the instances of the same site.
Yes.
And when I tested it, it is not, I think it's not trivial not to get a live site. It's not to get a new instance of the same site. You start to develop on your local machine, and there's a point when you want to make your site live.
Yes.
And it seems to me it's not fully the same way as we did it with Drupal 7. So we could talk about something that what
yes, that's
what we should do.
Yes, that's actually an important point. So when you install a site, then it becomes a new site.
Yeah.
So when you take the same code base and you go through the installer, it is a new site. When you install the site becomes gets its UUID, and then it's a new site. So when you develop a site and then you want to deploy it or make it live, you need to have the live site be the same site. So there's several ways on how you can achieve that. One of them is taking the database. Like for example, the first thing you do when you install Drupal, you export the database of your like just installed fresh Drupal. And then you start from there. You import this database. Alternatively, you can set the site UUID to the other site UUID. So you can go and edit the configuration of the site and say, hey, your UUID is now a new value, and you set it to be the same, then CMI will accept the import. And there's yet another option. It's a pseudo install profile called config installer. And it allows you to upload the zip file to it. And there's also an issue to allow having a populated staging directory to install it from there. But I can also not show you that at the moment, unfortunately, because it also has some issues, and because it's an installation profile, Drupal thinks that you installed this profile when you actually, like the configuration that you try to import says it has been installed with another profile. So it's there's some non-trivial issues to be worked out, but I'm pretty sure it will be one of the first stops to go, because it's maintained by Alex Pott, and I'm sure you all know him. So I'm very optimistic, let's say, that this will be like a very good way to do things. But it's like Drupal 8 is almost in reach, but there's some things that just prevent you from actually doing that right now. And I got like the latest core, and then there it doesn't really work. So maybe should have taken an older version, but yeah. But that was your question, right? I understood you correctly. Okay. Do you have other questions? Yeah.
You said in local settings PHP, you can override some settings. Can you override which modules are installed? For example, in all of devs environment enable dev module?
No. Unfortunately, you cannot. And you can also not override the color of the site. If you use Bartik, you cannot override the color of the default blue, you cannot make it green in the configuration override. Both of them have a reason for that, and that's why I said before, you cannot override all the configuration. You can override some configuration. And the color is a pretty, how shall I say, stupid reason. The reason is it gets compiled into CSS. So it doesn't make sense for the color to be overridden by language, for example, or some other dynamic configuration override. But it would be okay to have a static configuration override, like from settings/php. But in the code, it even it has a comment and says it doesn't make sense to override the color, so it gets like the unoverwritten configuration. And the modules, that's a pain point. And there's some contrib ways probably in the future that will solve this. The problem with this is the modules or which modules are enabled is very, very fundamental to how your Drupal site works. And so this gets built into the container. And then when you do all of this, it's too late. Like you need the whole thing to override the configuration, and at that point you cannot override which modules are enabled anymore.
But you probably can override settings, like a module could have like a config state that says this word enabled or
yes,
not.
Yes.
And then override
yes.
that.
For example,
email.
Yeah, exactly. But then the modules need to take care of that.
Yeah,
like if
have the module enabled on each environment.
Yeah, exactly. For example, the config. There's a module called config read only that I highly recommend. That allows you to lock the configuration. So it's useful when later I can show you a couple of use cases, and you will see why this is useful. For example, on the live site, you don't want to edit the configuration, because the configuration is always imported and exported as a whole. So when you change the configuration on the live site, it basically means you develop on the live site. It means that when you want to synchronize the configuration, you need to, you can accept one or B. Is the configuration, do you want to import it or not? And so when you want to update your live site with the new configuration, you need to incorporate the changes or the configuration that's there already that has been changed since the last time you exported the configuration from there. So if you change configuration on your live site, you need to export it, get it to your import it on your development machine, which means you get rid of all you had done until then, do the development that you do on the other environment, and then go back and import it on the live side again. That import then destroys all the configuration changes that happened in between the export from before. So, okay.
So it is not possible to have multiple developers on the same project.
Exactly. The thing is,
Probably try to use Git for this.
exactly. So the thing is, you want to use Git for this, and when you use Git, you can merge the configuration in Git because the configuration is files, and Git knows how to do that. The problem becomes if you change the configuration in such a way that the files make perfectly sense for Git, but do not make sense for Drupal anymore. Canonical example for this: you start, and you can try it out yourself. It's really fun. You set up two sites with the same configuration. I can show you. Let's do that. So I have here my live site, and I have here the test. Maybe okay. So yeah, here I'm logged in, on the other one not. Here it says development site, and here it says test site. Oh no, I shouldn't do that because otherwise the system will get confused. Anyway, when you go, you install the standard profile. I get it here. And then on one, you add the taxonomy field, content types. So I have these two things. And here I go to manage fields and I add the field. And I reuse the field tags, the taxonomy tags field. I call it the same. Yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, well. Okay, I'm happy. If I go to configuration, configuration synchronization, and I see that I changed some configuration. So I exported just before the configuration into my staging directory. So now it compares the active one with my staging one. So if I want to import the staging one, I will destroy what I just did. So I will remove the field node or field node page field tags, this field instance or field as it's called now. You remember Chicks this morning said that this unfortunate name change that got switched around. So not the base, but the instance. And they will also change the form display and the view display because those have been updated to have the field there as well. We can see, for example, here the difference. You'll see it will get removed, I guess. Here the tags will get removed. Yeah. All right. Can you see that, or is it too small? Yes? Good? Okay. Maybe I can also make it bigger. All right. So I will export the configuration and I will say yes. And now if I synchronize the configuration, there's nothing to synchronize because I just exported it. Now, another thing. Here, there's no changes to be exported. And you see the site name is different if I go back to the site here. Here it says development site. And that is because I overwrote it. Default settings to PHP. You see I overwrote the configuration here. So this was not actually the configuration. So now it's there again, and here you will see the site name is the one that we had before, the unoverwritten one. So in the exported configuration, when you go here, no, it was here as well. Where was it? The system site. System site, yes, there. You see the name is not what it shows. It's the same as it shows here, but not what it shows on the front page, because here it uses the overwritten one. Okay. So if I do here git pull, here we didn't add it to Git yet, so fuck. And then on the other one we can git pull, and then on the live site, which is this one, no, this one. Configuration, configuration synchronization. It will say that I have a new configuration, and there's these differences, and I can import all, and it will import all. And it will go through this step. It showed before it showed also the removal, because that would have been removing. And also another important thing that you need to realize is that if I would not do that, if I would be now the second developer and I would do something else, and I would do git pull before exporting the configuration, then I would export my configuration and overwrite the previous commit. And if you overwrite the previous commit, you cannot import the configuration that had been that came from the second developer, and hence it's lost. Because you commit and you push your configuration, and whatever the other developer just did will be lost. So because Drupal doesn't merge configuration, it imports and exports. And you rely on Git to merge. So you need to allow Git to merge. It means you first export the configuration, and then you get the changes from the other developer. And then Git can merge it or not, but it will tell you. And then you import it again, because if you continue to develop now without importing the merged configuration, you don't know if the configuration that you've merged is actually still makes sense, because Git doesn't know Drupal. Git is independent of Drupal. Git merges files. Git doesn't check if the files that have been merged are good. So you need to import it so that you know the configuration is good. And in addition, if you continue to develop, you continue to develop with the state that you just exported, not the one that you had merged. So, like, the workflow is slightly more complicated. But if you think about it, if you were to develop the same feature on Drupal 7, it would be the same. But since a feature tracks only one part, a whitelisted subset of configuration, then that's okay, because you might develop a different feature and you don't interfere on the same files, you don't interfere on the same configuration. And in Drupal 8, usually you also don't interfere with the same configuration, so you edit different files, and then Git merges happily and it just works. You just need to be aware of this strict workflow. You have to first export, then actually also commit it to Git, because otherwise, well, if there is conflicts, it wouldn't allow you to pull it. Then you merge, then you import, so that your site, before you continue developing, is on the same state as the configuration that's in code. Then you continue. And that's also why it's really important to not allow the live site to change the configuration, because if the live site changes configuration, the live site is another developer. So if you cannot avoid changing the configuration on the live site, then you need to have one developer that's sole, or not maybe sole purpose, but that has the responsibility to make sure that before you deploy configuration to the live site, that you get the configuration from the live site first somehow, and that you can merge somehow and test again, or make sure that the merged configuration is sane to then deploy to the live site. And last time I gave this presentation, in the use case that I want to do now. So let's change the site name as well and say it's a live site. Where is it here? Site information. And let's, for example, content types. So let's get back to the way it was before. We delete this. Okay, now it's too late. It would also tell you when you delete the configuration what other configurations are affected by that. For example, the form display would have been changed as well to not show that anymore. So we do quickly, we export it. You see it's basically the other way around. I forgot the MSM. All right. So now on the live site, it should say live site. And if we go to structure, content types, basic page, the field should be gone. And yes, the field is gone. All right. Now let's create a nice conflict. So I'm on the live side and I say, but I wanted to have this field. So I add the existing field again. The same way I added it before. And this is mandatory. All right, I'm happy. So, but on the other developer, he goes to the content page and says, the article also shouldn't have this tags field. So we delete it here. And here it tells you like what other stuff would be affected. So we delete it. Now we're happy. All right, let's go back to our workflow. We're on the test site here. We export our configuration. And on the other side, which is potentially the other developer, now it's called live, but it doesn't matter, that you will get the concept. We do it, as I said before. We first export the configuration. I should have added a yes. Yes, I want to do that. Then we will git pull. Everything worked. No conflict. And now, last time I gave this talk, Drush would happily do that, and Drupal would not complain. Now the issue has been fixed, and now if I do Drush config import, it will say, these are the changes, you want to do that? I say yes. Bam! Explode. Let's do that on the interface so that we see it nicely. We have configuration synchronization. We see these are the changes. I will explain in a moment what happens. We import all, and maybe here it works. Oh, no, it cannot be. So here it gives you a nice error. Why on Drush it just, errors, that's what happens. And here it says configuration field node page field tags depends on field storage node field tags. Configuration that will not exist after import. So the thing is, on the test site here, we removed the field from the last. The last field. We removed the field from the last entity that it was attached to, which in turn removes the field storage, or the field base in Drupal, the field storage. In the other one, we added the same field to another content type, which just adds another field instance. And so there's completely different set of configuration that are affected by this. Basically here you can see it. You can see the field storage here has been removed. And the other thing doesn't change because I already have the field storage, the field instance on the other one that doesn't get removed. Here it also, the one on the article also gets removed, but the one on the page doesn't. Because in Git at the moment, the files say that the field tags on the page shouldn't get removed because it was just added in a different commit. So Git is happy to do that. You didn't change the same files. You add and remove other files. And that's why it's important to follow this step. And now I'm the second developer and I'm cursing at the first one because we didn't communicate well enough, because this happened, and because we frequently pull and push, I know it had to be the last one because it worked before. And then I can just go and see what happened here and with my last thing. And this message here is even smart enough to tell you why this happened. So you say, aha, okay, the field storage is not there anymore. So either you recover it from your commit before, that's why it's important to commit, or you remove the other one that you added. So, I mean, this is something that neither Drupal nor Git can solve for you. This is where the person, the developer, needs to be smart and needs to know what he's doing, and then it can resolve this problem. But if you think about it, it's not a regression. If you do that in Drupal 7 on the same feature, it works the same way, except maybe probably it fails even worse. So I think it's really nice, and it tells you what the problem is, and it allows you to solve the problem. And if you work with Git and you understand Git, then it's not a big problem. I mean, it can be, but if you follow a nice workflow, then you're safe most of the time.
Besides deleting stuff, is another workflow that could get you in a state where your configuration is not importable?
Yeah, if you edit a configuration in such a way that you don't edit the same line, but edit like the different lines that are then not compatible with each other. And that's, like I tried with a couple of things and I didn't succeed. It always resulted in a merge conflict. And so, yes, it can also happen on an individual file. And then it will say it just looks at dependencies, this thing. So then maybe the configuration would be in a state that is not the individual configuration doesn't make sense, and then that would violate the schema for the configuration, and then you would get an error that the schema is mismatched because it checks the schema when it tries to save the config on import. So you would also get an error, and it will also tell you where the error is. But I didn't. It's pretty robust because the configuration are like encapsulated. So, and it's the only way you can do that is if you change the permissions on different roles, because the permissions are not atomic in that sense as in Drupal 7, but they are part of the role. So each role has the property of having the permission or not. And so the permission, you cannot export the permission for like a feature for your content type because the permission is bound to the role. So that's also a difference. The atomicity, or I cannot pronounce it. Anyway, how atomic the configuration is a bit different. But that was a choice on where to draw the line. And yeah, so before my session's up, unless you have other questions, I'm also happy to answer. I will quickly go through where features comes into this workflow. Because now you saw me produce this error and you say, but I don't want to do that, and what if I have configuration on the live side that changes? I only want to update a certain part of configuration. And you can individually import and export configuration, and you can use features for that as well, because features can import and export a whole bundle of configuration between sites. But then you're basically back to Drupal 7 and its behavior, and you miss out on the CMI. And you don't want, I mean, it's, if you don't want to have nice things, then you don't want to, and you can live the same way with Drupal as with Drupal 7, do the same thing, but you miss out, and you miss out on all of this, and you miss out of these errors, because these errors only come if you import everything and you try to make the system to be in the sane state. And if you don't do it the CMI way, CMI cannot help you. I mean, it's very simple. But there is a use case for features in Drupal 8, and I'm excited to use features in Drupal 8 for what it's intended to be. And it depends on the configuration update manager, which is another contrib module. that allows you to see the difference between what modules provided in their config install, like in their default configuration or original configuration that they come with, and the ones that you have on your site. So you can if you install a module that comes with a view and then you edit this view, the configuration update manager tells you the difference between the two. And features depends on this functionality so that it can then decide to go back to the other feature or update the feature with the new configuration that you updated, depending on whether you're the consumer of the feature or the producer of the feature. It's focused on packaging and for reuse purpose. So it's not packaging for deployment, it's packaging for reuse. And it's meant to be a development module. And it also comes with the features UI in case that's part of the way it works. But the features, the modules that you export with features, they don't depend on features. So because features basically adds all the configuration you want to export to the config import, to this default configuration place. And since all the modules in Drupal 8 are essentially features in that way, the module doesn't need to depend on features. What is new? Features now has assignment plugins and feature bundles. And assignment plugins are basically a way for features to automatically detect which configuration should be bundled together. The default is to bundle it by configuration, by content type and all the associated things. But you can also say you want to be it based on a view or on other things. And you can also make your own assignment plugin and then bundle the features automatically the way you want. It comes with bundles or namespaces, which will enforce the namespacing that you had to manually do in Drupal 7. So it prefixes all the stuff. And then it also allows you to rename the prefix easily so that you don't have to go and change all the hook names and so on. But the user interface is in a separate module, but it still looks like more or less the same. So it's a developer module, and the path is under config development configuration / features rather than under structure. Also to tell you that this is what it wants to do. And it's not meant to be used for deployment. I know I stress this a lot, but this is really the point you should take away from this presentation. And you shouldn't enable it in production. So unless this problem that you have different modules in different environment, and unless this gets solved, you first have to uninstall features before deploying the code or before synchronizing the code. I'm sure Contrib will come and save the day and solve this issue because everybody will face it. So yes, and that I already said. The Drush workflow with features in Drupal 8 is basically the same. Instead of Drush features, it has Drush feature list or FL, and you can also add the features to an installation profile. So this is the summary of the presentation, basically. When you have a multiple developer workflow, you need to follow this workflow pretty strictly. You need to export it and import it all the time. You version all the configuration in Git. So in that sense, you version the state of the site that is in, or not. It's overloading of terms again, but the way the site behaves together with your code, you have the configuration, and everything is in Git and not whitelisted parts of the configuration. Commit before synchronizing. This is just as a backup, and it will save you because if you import configuration, you lose what you just did. You lose your work. So when you export it and commit it, it's saved, it's in Git, and you can always import the previous commit, and then it's fine. And import the merge configuration before continuing. This is not pending anymore. I should have removed that. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't continue developing from a point that you agreed on in Git in this kind of contract almost. And a change in configuration is development. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but this is my firm belief that if you change configuration, you need to treat it as development. And as a conclusion of that is if you change configuration on live site, you're developing on the live site. It's really simple. Unless that's what you do already anyway. I mean, if you do that, then you don't need CMI. So then you can also be happy. But if ever you can, you should use the config read only. And this works in the same way that you suggested before, that you have the module enabled, but then you have a setting that you override that enables the module or not. So the module is enabled and all the services are in the container and so on, but the module doesn't react. So the config read only is the other way around. It's enabled and by default doesn't do anything. It doesn't react. But if you have in the settings.php the config read only mode true, or I forgot exactly what the thing is, but you will see it on the profile page, then it will block the configuration save. So when you save the configuration, it will error and it will say configuration changes are disabled. I think, yeah.
What happens if we set the read only for live site? So, for example, the customer wants to delete the field.
Yeah.
Then Drupal.
The thing is, if the customer has the admin role and can do that himself, and you have this enabled, you'll get a nice big warning, and the field will still be there, and the customer is annoyed that it's still there. But he cannot do it. If this is enabled, or not only the module enabled, but also the mode enabled, then you cannot change the configuration. Now you can only synchronize it, but you cannot form submit the configuration change.
If you are giving any permissions to the customer, then the customer should be treated as an developer.
Yes. If you give the customer the right to edit configuration, he is a developer. Then you don't need to tell the customer that he's a developer, but you need to have one developer of you that gets all the customer's development into the workflow. Yeah, that's the takeaway. And there's different options for that. For example, if you cannot lock it, then you can automatically instead of refusing to allow the form to be submitted, you commit to Git to another branch, and then you have it in your workflow. And there's already a module that does that. People are crazy fast with this kind of things, but yeah, it depends on your setup, and yeah, often I guess the customer needs to be able to change stuff, but that's another thing that in Drupal 8 changes. What is configuration and what is content is really separate. So if you develop your own things and you know that the customer is going to change them, then they're just not configuration. They're nodes, or content entities. And the features workflow, therefore reusing the configuration on other projects and synchronize partially between different sites. So you have like project A and project B, and you use features on the level of on the development environment level and not on the other ones. The staging or testing is to make sure that you can actually import the configuration properly and you can see what happens if you do that on the live side. And you use features on that level. If you use features on the production level, then you're developing on the live side. Very simple, more or less. And that's it. You still have 3.5 minutes for questions? Or 2.5? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your long-lasting presentation.
90 minutes it was.
Yeah, it was in time, yes.
Yeah.
This is just a small thing to remember for this.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, wine. Nice.
Especially it's wine
From here?
invented this area, yes.
Ah, nice. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right.
This is yours? Yes. Thank you.